Hello and welcome to the OT Schoolhouse Podcast, your source for the latest school-based occupational therapy tips, interviews, and research. Now, to get the conversation started, here are your hosts, Jayson and Abby. Class is officially in session.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 27 of the OT Schoolhouse Podcast. My name is Jayson Davies and I am your host. And let's get this podcast started off right because it is April 2nd. It is OT month. Woo woo! So also summer is right around the corner. We're only a few months away from that as well. So we got a lot to celebrate today, this month, going forward. Everything's looking good. I hope you all are having a great start to your April and that everything's just going wonderful at your schools. In fact, I actually want to kind of give a little call to action. I want to see what you all are doing for OT month. I'm putting together a few things that you'll see throughout the month on Instagram, but I also want to see what you're doing. So tag me in a picture on Snapchat, or sorry, not Snapchat. I don't use Snapchat. Tag me a picture on Instagram or maybe Facebook. Let us know what you're doing. I'd love to see if you're putting any flyers up or if you're doing any little events on campus or maybe on a college campus you're doing something if you're a student. I'd love to hear it, love to see wow, I can't even say that right. I'd love to see it or love to hear about it. That would be really cool to see. Today we're doing something a little bit different. So I first want to say thank you for clicking to press play on this episode. I know the title's a little different than some of the other titles we've had. You know, we just had two really great podcasts on sensory integration, and now we're going to kind of turn the corner a little bit. Like I said, this is OT month and summer's coming up right around the corner. And so for some of you that may be interested in having your own, you know, either not necessarily a full clinic, but, you know, see a few patients on the side or something, this is going to be the perfect podcast for you today. Today we have on special guest Scott Harmon, who is the host of the Start a Therapy Practice podcast, which can be found on iTunes or anywhere else podcasts can be found. Scott is also the face behind startatherapypractice.com, where he helps OTs, PTs, and speech therapists start therapy practices, whether it be from the, you know, just seeing the first few clients all the way up to building a clinic. He actually owns 2 clinics down in Arkansas, so he's here to talk a little bit about that today. Can't wait to share this with you. Real quick, before we get started, be sure to check out the show notes at otschoolhouse.com/episode 27. And with that, we're going to get started with this episode. I can't wait for you all to hear it. Here is Scott Harmon from startatherapypractice.com. Hey, Scott, welcome to the OT Schoolhouse Podcast. How are you doing this evening?
Jayson, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Can't complain. It's been a cold few days here, but it's very nice. How's it over there? Are you in Arkansas, right?
I am in Arkansas. And then you say cold few days in Southern California. It must be pretty bad.
Oh, very bad. Yeah. Well, I mean, we had some snow in places we don't usually get snow, but I've heard you guys have had some cold down there as well. Is that true?
It's just a lot of rain. You know, I told somebody today I saw an old man pairing off animals and followed them into a big boat. I got worried. You know?
Yeah, there we go. Everyone pack up your bags, right? So, yeah. Well, I'm really happy to have you on the show today, and I'm glad you're actually the one who reached out to me about being on your show, which was awesome. But I'm glad to have you here because I think I might have told you already, but I actually came across your website. It's got to be like 3 years ago now, before the OT Schoolhouse even existed, when I was thinking about starting a private practice. And so it's just crazy how the world kind of spins. OT is a small community, and it is what it is. Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you stumbled across me there. So yeah, the technology is. I'm a little bit older than you, so the technology always floors me when somebody says, "Hey, you have a podcast?" You know, they reach out to me somehow. It was funny here not too long ago. My grandma, who's 92. She needed some OT. And so she lives in Missouri. I'm from Missouri originally. And so there's an OT who does home health down the road from her who was providing the OT. So she came into my grandma's house, my aunt's there, and they just got to talking. That's what you do with home health, right? Mm-hmm. So the OT mentioned that she wanted to start a practice. You know, she wanted to start her own practice there in the small town that I'm from. And so my aunt, she said, well, you should look up my nephew. He might be able to help you. And so she started putting 2 and 2 together, you know, the last name Harmon. And she said, is your nephew Scott Harmon? And she's like, yeah. And she said, "Oh, I listen to his podcast all the time." Like, wow, what a small world. What a great use of
Right?
technology. So,
Yeah. What usually I wait till later, but for this, I mean, you have a podcast, you have startatherapypractice.com, you have the course that you have over there, as well as many blogs and stuff. What's been the coolest thing that has happened for you? Like, one of my cool things was someone from like Macau, China reached out to us and was like, keep doing what you're doing. That's awesome. I mean, that sounds like a pretty cool story you just shared, but is there another one where you're just like floored by what has happened because you have a website?
I think it's somewhat, it's the everyday, not the everyday things, but it's the things where just which is the total reason I did this, starting a podcast about starting a practice, was therapists who reach out to me and just ask some of the simple questions, or the questions that I think have simple answers, just because I've done this for a while. But when a therapist reaches out and asks that simple question, and I'm able to help them through that situation, or that with that answer, that always kind of floors me. Like, wow, you really didn't know that. Not that they're dumb, they just didn't know what they didn't know.
Yeah.
Didn't know what questions to ask, really. And so here recently, I had one of my classmates from OT school. Is starting a hand therapy clinic, not up the road from me, and she's probably an hour from me. And so she got online and started, how do you start a therapy practice? Well, that's exactly why I chose, the website, how to start a
Yeah.
therapy. Because what are you going to type in? How do I start a therapy practice?
Yep.
And so she comes across me and she Facebook messaged me and she's like, Scott, I want to start a practice. And who do I come across? I come across you. So we're kind of in conversations about her starting her own hand clinic, which is, it's small world, big world kind of thing. That floored me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just the OT community is definitely tight knit. We're close. We're friendly. We all get along. Pretty cool stuff we got going on.
Yeah.
So let's take a step back, and we kind of already skipped the whole "who are you" part. And so Scott, tell us, you owned, obviously, startatherapypractice.com. You do everything there with the podcast, but obviously you had a practice before you started that website. So share with us a little bit about how you started the practice.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did, out of OT school, which I've been in OT for 25 years now, which is hard to believe because I'm only 30 years old. That's
5-year-old prodigy.
Yeah, that's right. No, I've been around the block a few times. So out of OT school, I worked developmental preschool for 12 years. And I was driving almost an hour one way to my work. So I got kind of tired of that. And as we had a growing family at the time, I've got 6 kids. So at that time, I probably had 4 kids, and they were really young. So at one point we had 3 kids under the age of 3, which there's, several months out of my life I don't remember because of that. You don't sleep.
I'm sure.
So as the family started growing, I got to where I was like, you know what? I don't want to drive 1 hour one way to work, on the road 2 hours a day. Plus, what if, something happens at home? I'm that far away from the house. So I floated the idea to my wife, who is also an OT, about starting a clinic in our hometown, which we don't live in a big town. We live, our hometown is 5,000 to 7,000 people. So there's not a lot of people. Now we're only 20 minutes away from a bigger town. So I floated the idea to her. So we started praying about that and started thinking, could this happen? Would this work? And started asking around, do you think this would work? And that kind of got us on the road to that. So we pulled the trigger on that, and we rented a space and started a clinic. And my wife was the clinic for a little while because she was staying at home with the kids. She was answering the phone, and being a therapist, she was able to speak the language and make arrangements if somebody had questions about what we provided or setting up therapy. So she was the
really clinic. So she started the business. You were just the employee.
That's it. Yeah.
Sounds fair.
Nothing's changed, Jayson. It's still the same. And I wouldn't have it any different either. So
yeah.
No, but we collaborated obviously and started to practice. But what was interesting is speech therapy was the first need for somebody who reached out to us. So I had to find a speech therapist to hire, and eventually we found a PT to hire. So we provide OT, PT, and speech, and we did that. We started in 2006. So, and then we branched out and opened a second clinic in that bigger town that we're close to. And we started that a few years after we started our initial clinic. And so now it's every day's new and different. But yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way. Now my older kids are able to help us out in the clinic, and there's benefits of having my own practice that I didn't even foresee, because now my kids are learning skills by helping us in the clinic. And it's benefit on top of benefit. It's been a huge blessing for my family to have come this far with it. So that's how it began. Now, how Starter Therapy practice began is one of my wife's students, or not students, but they went to OT school together, wanted to start her own practice in the northern part of the state. And she knew we had a practice, and she wanted to come down and kind of spend half a day and ask me questions about how to start a therapy practice. So her and a few of her colleagues, some fellow therapists, came down and hung out with me for half a day and took the tour and just asked all kinds of questions. And at the time, I was listening to a lot of podcasts. And so I had created a little bit of margin, a little extra time in my day at the clinic. And I'm not one just to sit there and watch the world go by. I was like, well, maybe I could start a podcast, and just maybe people would be interested in starting a therapy practice. And these people seem to gain a lot of knowledge just by asking me questions. I could kind of do an information dump, on this podcast. So that's what started the podcast, Starter Therapy Practice podcast. And I think it's been 5 or 6 years. I can't remember. I think it was 2013.
Wait, really? So the podcast came first?
The podcast did come first. You don't have to have, yeah. At that point, you had to have a website for your podcast. So I had
so you had a makeshift website to kind of host the podcast, basically?
Yeah, that's it. That's what I did. And so that was in 2013, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And yeah, so I guess that's 5-6 years later. That it's hard to believe it's been that long.
And you're still doing it? Still loving it?
Still, yeah, I love doing the podcast. I'm trying to find somebody to do a little more editing on it. My kids have edited the episodes for me in the past, but you being a podcast owner know that the devil's in the details, and you want control of exactly what you sound like.
Yeah. And it's a little almost too much control sometimes. You're deleting, you go back and forth. Wait, do I delete that little pause, or do I leave it in there?
Yeah,
do I delete it? No. Okay, I'll delete it.
That's it. Yeah. You sweat over over that. And then people probably, they wouldn't know the difference, but you and I do.
Yeah. So if you had to estimate, how many clinics do you think you've helped start up over the years?
Wow, that's a good question. I wish I knew that. If you're listening right now and you started a clinic, email me and say, hey, I started a clinic, Scott, after I listened to your pod. That'd be cool.
Right? I'm sure you've helped, hundreds probably.
I would hope so. If the Academy of Private Practice is my membership side of Starter Therapy Practice. And so I would say, just estimating there would be at least 100, Yeah. Hopefully they've started a practice because of me. So that's fun to think about.
I'll do this for you, because I didn't know anything about OTs being online at all until I did come across your site. And no, I didn't start a therapy practice, but I did start the OT Schoolhouse. And that was in part about knowing that something that OTs were going online to look for stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'll give you a little shout out, because I did get a lot of information. You had a lot of free information on your website, and you had your kind of your template of how to keep track of therapy notes and stuff like that. And I was like, whoa, like, that's super cool. And so that inspired me a little bit, and other stuff that you had on there. So I'll say thank you, and that you helped me start OT Schoolhouse. So thank you.
Wow. I appreciate that. That's
Definitely.
humbling. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's dive into a few questions. If we can't help anyone out there who may potentially want to start a practice, a lot of school-based OTs, I feel like we get a lot of questions about burnout, and OTs get burned out. And so why do you see people wanting to start a private practice?
Hmm. I think there's different reasons. One of them can be burnout, just like you said. They're like, I can, I'm going to invent a better mousetrap here. I don't have to put up with this over here. So they might be disgruntled with where they're at, or just burn out. I have some therapists who come to me and say, you know what, Scott, I've been out of therapy for a while. Maybe they had a child and stayed at home for a little while with their child, and the thought of working full time for somebody doesn't appeal to them. So maybe they're interested in seeing just some clients on the side, and that necessitates starting a therapy practice, even if it's just small. Just seeing a couple of clients, it's still starting a therapy practice, and that's very much who I am trying to target. Is not that franchise type therapist who wants to start multiple clinics. We might get there. That's what I do. But it's very much targeted to that solo therapist who's just like, you know what, I want to dip my toe in this. Or maybe I do want to open my own clinic. And that's kind of my wheelhouse right there. I really like speaking to those therapists and helping them get that off the ground. But there's certainly different reasons people are motivated to start their own practice. But a lot of it is, and OTs, I think, especially are this way. We like to have control of how we provide our therapy, because it is so individualistic as far as what we're trying to do and what we're trying to provide. I remember working at the facility that I was working before, and there, every place has rules. You can't just do anything you want. You could certainly ask, but I remember when I first had my clinic, and us OTs, we like swings. And so I walked in there and I said, I can hang a swing anywhere I want. And I was like, if I wanted to hang a swing in the waiting room, I could hang a swing.
Absolutely.
That appealed to me. So there's different reasons, I think.
Yeah. No, I think, like you said, everyone has their own reason. You were a school-based therapist. You weren't not employed by a school district, right? But you did work in the schools, correct?
I have before. So we've done school contracts through our clinic before. And so it's been a brief period that I have been a school therapist, but I've done enough of it to speak the language, I guess.
You know what an IEP is, and you know how to get through all that stuff. Exactly. So if there was a school-based OT and they kind of were thinking, hey, summer's coming up, what could I potentially do? Could I make a few extra dollars through seeing some private patients? Mm-hmm. What would you recommend, kind of that first step that they really do?
Get a business card.
There you go.
Get a business card. So I just did a solo podcast episode on getting a business card and what to have on a business card. But it's a very tangible thing that you can always carry around with you. You should always carry around a business card, because when you run into people, you're going to have a conversation. Hey, what do you do? I'm a school-based therapist. I'm a school OT here at the school. Oh, really? Well, my child has autism. Oh, okay. And then, the conversation's off and running at that point. Mm-hmm. And you can't stop at the business card. Your business card has to point somewhere. So it'd be nice to have a website. But if you're a school-based therapist and you're like, Scott, I don't want a website. I don't have time for that. At least a business card. And then, obviously that's got a way to get a hold of you. I think your potential clients get confused on the steps that it takes to get the therapy. Now, some states have more regulations. California has a few regulations about getting therapy, whereas other states like Texas and even Arkansas, where I'm at, they don't have as many regulations. So you might just be able to set up therapy with a client during the summer, and they pay you cash, and you don't have to do anything. It might just be word of mouth. Hey, Jayson is an OT, and he'd be willing to see your kid this summer. And then you might be off and running. But you got to make some connections, and you got to have a way for people to get a hold of you. So I would certainly, I mean, if you can have a website, you need a website, even if it's just a one-page website, just to let people know who you are and what you do.
And to be honest, it's too easy to create a website nowadays not to have one if you're going to do something that simple. There's ones out there that you don't even have to pay for, and you can put your information out on. So definitely do that. So again, still talking about that one person that may want to go out during summer and maybe get a few clients. Do you think they need to go full force into it if they're going to do it? Or like you're kind of saying a second ago, just dabble with a few students, 1 or 2 students for the summer, and then go back to school-based OT?
Mm-hmm. I think it's, people are in different situations, but I can give myself as an example here, and my wife too, in that as I was working at the developmental preschool, I took some clients on the side as contract. And so I contracted with our state Department of Health to see these clients, or you might contract with your state early intervention program, which is, I don't know if I would recommend that. There's a lot of paperwork and hoops to jump through with early intervention, but you can put your services out. My wife contracted with the state Department of Health to see adults. She was a pediatric therapist at the time, and she really had fond memories of her. She also did a level 2 field work at the VA. So she really enjoyed her time at the VA, and she missed treating adult clients. So she started seeing a couple of after work clients through the Department of Health, and she loved treating stroke patients. And so she did that on the side. That was really dipping our toe into the world of private practice. And so then the next step after this, you're kind of getting used to the idea. So then the next step is to go find a client all on your own who's willing to pay you maybe cash out of their pocket for therapy. There's sort of a barrier or a mindset that a lot of people have that insurance should pay for the therapy. So to get beyond that is difficult, because once you start down that road of accepting insurance as payment, that is kind of a whole new ballgame. There's a lot of hoops to jump through to get credentialed with insurance. So if you're just wanting to see kids for the summer and you don't want to do that through a clinic or through another outpatient facility, you're probably kind of relegated to, accepting cash payment. So then you have to convince, your potential clients why that's a good move for them. You might have to think of some good reasons why it's okay to pay cash out of pocket. And some of those might be, we could access your insurance, but what's your deductible? Oh, you got a $2,000 deductible. You're not going to eat through that in summer therapy. So you might as well pay me cash, and I'll give, you can get some people call it a super bill. I don't like calling it a super bill invoice because it sounds terrible, doesn't it? Who wants to pay a super bill? I don't want to pay a super bill.
It's like an evil villain.
You're going to charge me a super bill? That's going to be terrible. That's going to be a lot of money. But no, you can tell people, look, you can pay me cash and I will give you an invoice with the CPT code, the diagnosis code. You can turn that into your insurance. Insurance can reimburse you for that. So that way you don't have to be on the hook for all of this therapy. Now, you're going to pay me cash. You got to pay me all of it.
Yeah.
But if you want to get reimbursed from insurance, you certainly can seek that out on your own, and I will help as much as I can. I'll give you a copy of the evaluation report, of the progress notes and whatnot. But that's one way around that. And over at startertherapypractice.com, if you click on free forms, there's a super bill template you can use for free over there if you're interested in doing that.
I had never thought about that, but That's a good idea, because that was one of the things that I did get hung up on when I was thinking about doing it. Because basically all these questions I'm asking you, let's be real, they're all about me. I mean, but no, I mean, I kind of had different ideas. I was like sitting around, and it's like, I want to do something um, over the summer. And I had never thought about, like, I was hung up on cash. I don't have the ability to take insurance. So who's going to come see me when I can't take your insurance?
Mhm.
But you just kind of gave a way around that. And it might not work for everyone. I don't know all that good stuff, but if it works for a few people, awesome. So
Yeah, and I think you at least have to give parents, if parents need the option, if they're really seeking that out and they know that Jayson is an awesome school therapist and their child needs an awesome school therapist, they it's just for summer. Well, that's a smart connection to me, and you're willing to come to the home. A lot of clinics, practice owners, they don't want to go to the home. I don't want to go to the home. I mean, I've got a nice clinic. I want you to come to my clinic, but you don't have a
mhm,
clinic and you're willing to go to the home. It seems like a good connect.
perfect.
So you might actually be doing that parent a favor and maybe even a disservice if you don't offer them that.
Potentially. So let's say I find the client. What would you say are a few things that kind of got to be in your private practice OT bag?
Mm, okay. So I think if you're charging them cash, if they're paying you cash, education is a big part of that. Why should they pay you cash when they can go to the outpatient clinic and they're going to access insurance? Well, first of all, you can come to the house. That's a big plus.
Hmm.
Second, they can get reimbursed from their insurance if it's going to be out of network, so they're going to need to see what that's all about. I, Also, in my free forms is it's a checklist. So what I found was parents would ask me, "Hey, your clinic's not in network with my insurance. What can I do? Because I can't find anybody who's in network with my insurance." And the reason for that is because your insurance stinks, because they don't like therapy. And that's why we're not in net. Nobody's in network with your insurance because they don't pay for therapy very much. So what I had created was a checklist to give to parents and say, look, I'm not in network with your insurance, so I can't call your insurance and check on benefits. Here's the questions to ask. And so I created that and printed it off, and it's in my free forms at the website. And so I give that to them, and then the key there is to follow up. The money's in the follow up. You got to call the parent back. Hey, did you call the insurance? What did they tell you? Oh, they told me they're not going to pay for therapy at all. Oh, I hate to hear that. Well, I'm willing to see your child. I would probably recommend twice a week, but if you're paying out of pocket, let's start with once a week. Let's just start, see how it goes. And you can cut it off and let them know they can cut it off anytime, because I think some parents are like, I'm going to be on the hook for twice a week for 3 months this summer. And that's going to, they start racking up the numbers. I can't
Hmm.
afford that. So start small and then go from there. That's one option to give them.
Gotcha. And so what about evaluations?
Mhm.
Is is it required? Do you need to do an evaluation before you start to see a kid in a private practice?
Mhm. So there's probably some state regulations that you might
Yes, I
need to
think
be
so.
aware of. Each state so that would call your licensing board and say, hey, what's the regulations for me doing private practice, as far as, do I need an eval, an initial evaluation? Do I need a prescription? That's a big one. Are you
Mhm.
do you have to have that prescription from the doctor? Some states, you don't have to have a prescription, then you're good to go. If you're accessing insurance, you're probably going to need a prescription. But if it's cash and your state doesn't require it, you don't need a prescription. I would do, even if our state didn't require, which honestly, I don't know if our state requires or not. I go by the strictest guidelines or regulations, which is our state Medicaid. So Medicaid requires an initial evaluation. So we always do an initial evaluation, even if they're paying cash. So I would recommend that evaluation. You want to get the baseline scores of a standardized assessment to see where you're at. That way, when you work your OT, you work your therapy magic, you can say, hey, we were here, now we're here. And that's because you decided to come see me for OT. Those are two good reasons to do an initial evaluation.
Yeah. So, I mean, that might mean that someone who's going to do this over the summer, they need to go out and purchase an assessment or two, a kit or two. Maybe, I don't know, what are some common evaluations you use over in the clinic?
Well, before that, there's some options there. So if you're close to a university, sometimes we borrow tests from a university. So, I mean, we have a lot of evaluation kits at our clinic, but there's some that are kind of obscure, especially when it comes to speech tests. So sometimes the speech therapist will, we're in the same town as the university who cranks out therapists. So the speech therapist will call them and say, hey, can we borrow this test kit? Sure, come on over and get it. You can borrow it. That might be an option, so you might not actually have to be out any money on a speech kit. You don't want to abuse that, but it might be something that you can look into. If you're doing kids, I mean, I have sort of moved away from the Peabody 2, and I like the Mullins. I like the Bot 2. Are they on the Bot 3 yet?
I don't think so. I'm still using the Bot 2.
No, you used the Bot 2. Yeah. I didn't think they were on the Bot 3 yet. So the Mullins is for a little bit younger crowd. You're probably 0 to 5, and your Bot's going to be probably 5 years and up. Those are probably two of the main tests that I would recommend if you're doing, a lot of parents might be, in the OT world, they might be concerned about handwriting. So then you can look at the THS, the handwriting test of handwriting revised, I believe it is.
The the THSR.
SR,
Test of handwriting skills revised.
Yeah, there it is. So we have that one. The VMI is a good, is a good test. It's probably I'm sure it's some of the same tests that you're using there.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Bot, THS, VMI, RAVMA, a few others.
But now if you go buy all those, I mean, the Mullins itself is almost $1,000. So you go buy a Bot kit. It's been a while since I bought mine. You're probably $300-400.
Yeah.
You could be out some money.
Yeah, so you're probably best to buy them as needed, and don't go out and buy them all, and then next thing you know, you're a few $1,000s in debt already, and you haven't even seen your first kit.
That's it. Yeah, and you want to know that you're going to try this for the long haul. If you're going to do this every summer for the next 10 summers, it might be a good investment, and it might be something that your OT buddy in the next town, they're not competition for you, but maybe they'd go in halvesies on a Bot kit, that you could split that up.
There you go. In fact, that actually kind of brings up something that I'm seeing out here in Southern California. I don't know if you've seen it out there, or if anyone else has seen it anywhere else, but there's starting to be places where you can almost rent a space in a therapy gym. And so you are your own contractor, and you are renting out a space from basically another therapist to use their gym to see a few clients. Have you seen that yet?
So when you say gym, are you talking more a gymnastics gym or an actual therapy gym?
Well, actually both. I have heard of people going to a gymnastics gym, but I'm talking more about a therapy gym. So it's almost like a hair salon, where each hair salon's their own individual entity basically, but they all rent the space. So you might have 4 therapists there in a small type of clinic, but none of them actually own the clinic, and they're all kind of renting space to work there. Have you heard of this?
I like the idea. I've had that idea over the years, but what's kept me from doing something like that is, in my mind, it sort of has to be a metropolis to pull that off. You'd have to have some flow of kids, which, like I said, I live in a small town. I couldn't pull that off. I mean, I guess you could run other things through there. You could work if you're doing gymnastics. There's a friend of mine. He owns a gymnastics gym in the town, the bigger town that that we have our clinic in, and it's a huge facility. So I approached him even before we opened our second clinic, and I said, "Hey, what would you think about me opening a therapy clinic inside your gymnastics gyms?" And we talked about it, went back and forth a little bit. But he wasn't he didn't want to do it. That was fine. But, at least I approached him with the idea. So if you're talking about, like you said, like a salon type of arrangement, you're renting a chair in a salon.
Mm-hmm.
It could be the same concept for renting your therapy space. And I do suggest that when I talk to potential practice owners, they're thinking about, I'm like, well, think about subleasing in somebody else's space.
Yeah.
If somebody has a gymnastics gym, or they have, PTs do this quite often. They'll approach a gym, for adults, and they'll say, hey, can I sublease some space here? I actually have a PT who subleases space in our pediatric facility. She treats adults. She does, is it called red needling? I think that's what it's called. And she needed a space in our small hometown here. Dry needling. I'm sorry. I'm thinking red line. Red line. There's two different PT treatments there. So she does dry needling, and she does that after hours in our pediatric clinic. So she's done that. She's subleasing from me, and everybody wins.
There you go. Yeah. And like I said, you're right, where you need that steady flow. This was down in Orange County, California, where I've heard about these clinics where multiple therapists are all kind of subleasing a time and a space in there. However, a recent therapy friend of mine was actually talking about a contact she has who is doing exactly the other side of it, where she's paying not too much. I want to say it was like maybe $10 to see a kid in some sort of gymnastics gym or something. And so she had worked out this deal that basically she's paying $10 an hour to see a kid in a gym that she obviously doesn't have to pay for all the mats. She doesn't have to pay for everything. And I don't know what she has access to in there. It's obviously not going to look like a world-class sensory integration type of gym, but there's going to be a lot of good stuff in there. So that might be an option for anyone out there that
I think that's a great option to approach a facility that you think, I could treat somebody in here and this would be awesome, and approach them and say, give them some options and say, I could pay you per month. I can pay you off the top for each kid. Like there's a big indoor trampoline park in our town,
Oh, that'd be fun.
You could do groups in there. You could say, look, you could rent the whole facility for an hour and then, do some group therapy. It's really, you have to, to use the cliche of thinking outside the box, but to come up with some different ways of maybe subleasing or using a space that would be conducive to therapy. Like there's a community center in our town, and they have a room that they'll charge you $25. I think it's just like half a day, $25 for a half a day.
Can't be that.
Huge room. And downstairs they have basketball courts. They have an elevated track. You could do therapy in, they do like exercise classes in there. Why couldn't you do therapy in there?
Yeah. Good idea. So like you said, you've dipped and dabbed in a little bit of school-based, and some of the culture, some of the things that go on with school-based. And one of those common things, and they seem to be on the rise, at least here in Southern California, is IEEs. And so what do you know about potentially being an IEE, independent evaluation, if you want to call them a provider, I guess, or an evaluator?
Yeah. Yeah. We've done that in our clinic. I did one here fairly recently, but it was 2 hours away. It was not a district that was even remotely close to us. And my thinking was there when they approached me is, you're far enough away that the optics of this are not going to hurt me if something goes bad. And because and you tell me from your end, the image I had, me coming in as an independent evaluator, is I'm the gunslinger. I might be perceived as the bad guy here, coming in, evaluating this child because something has not gone quite right. And in our instance, there was a lawsuit pending. So we were the independent evaluator in this lawsuit action that the parents brought against the school. So I really had to think about, you really have to think about how that's going to look as far as perception, and then how that potentially could come back on your reputation, right, wrong, or indifferent. You have to think how that's going to play out after you do that evaluation, after you sit in on that IEP meeting. What's mom and dad going to say to the school district? How is that going to play out in the lawsuit? And so
Hmm.
I would be interested from your side of the table, how that's perceived from the school-based therapist.
We get both sides of it because it really depends on why why the IEE is really being held, and also who gets to pick the IEE provider or evaluator. Because sometimes the district says, okay, yep, here's a list of people that we have on contract with, go ahead and pick one. And typically those are IEE providers that the district likes and will have no problem with. But then every now and then there's that IEE provider that comes in that the parent advocate knows, and they're coming in. And those are the ones where it gets a little dicey up in the air, and people get, nervous, and everyone's kind of, well, comparing OT reports, It's
Mhm.
like, this is my school-based OT report. Well, this is my clinic-based OT report that's in schools, and what is what, and all that good stuff. And it's unfortunate that it happens, but the reality is it does. And so it's kind of got both sides. And I think we're going to have another podcast about this soon, but just talking about, we need to just keep the child in our best interest. And I think everyone is doing that. And as long as we can do that, and you come into an IEE meeting with that in mind, and that this report is about the child and not about me versus you, him versus her, district versus parent, then we can all be civil about it and make amends and figure it out what we can do to best help the kid.
Mhm.
And I think that's the route we should take. Does it always go that way? Not necessarily.
Yeah.
But
Well, and I think as therapists, we really have to be careful, whatever side of the table you're on, to not let the parent in that situation, or the school for that matter, draw you in for to badmouth one side or the other. We, as a therapist, you have to take the high road there, because there has to be some sort of sanity in that situation, and the therapist, the OT, is in the perfect position to play that role. We don't want to badmouth our coworkers, our fellow therapists, or really the administration, or the parents for that matter. And we
no.
want to do, like you said, we want to do what's right by the child, and we want to bring light to that situation and not so much heat, because those situations can be contentious. In the
Mhm.
in the situation I was in, the mom was the wild card, and she was explosive. It was a difficult situation, and so I honestly, I gave my report, and I sat back and watched. If they asked me a question, I would answer it, but I was not putting my nose in that situation, because I really honestly didn't know the history that much of the situation. I came in as an independent evaluator, did my job, kind of got out. If they ask me a question, I'm going to answer it honestly, give some suggestions. But yeah, they can get heated.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been pretty fortunate to not be in too many of them, but I've heard many stories, and yeah, I wouldn't wish it upon many people like at all, because that is just not a good situation, or not a fun situation to be in.
No.
But if we can keep the kid at heart, I'm sure we'll all be good.
Yep.
Um, Going on, what about contracting with districts? So with school-based therapists, there's a wide variety of the way that we work for the school. Some of us are directly employed by the district. Others are contracted through a third-party agency, through maybe even a clinic like yours or something, to work at a school district. That may mean going to the school, or that may mean that the school buses kids or has their parents bring them after school. But still, some people, I think, are trying to be their own contract and contract their own services to a district. Have you ever experienced that, or did that yourself?
Yeah. It was my goal when we first started our practice, our clinic, to not have to have a school contract, because in our state, it's a rural state. There's very rural school districts, and so school districts, the smaller ones, especially will contract out that therapy, or at least part of it, during the year. So there's opportunities out there, and we've had those opportunities throughout the years of providing a school contract. What I had determined pretty early on was I didn't necessarily want the school contract for the school in the same town that my clinic was in, because for a couple of reasons. There could be some conflict of interest there.
Yeah.
Because honestly, the second location that we were at, we kind of outgrew our first one. We were right across from the school. I mean, we're just right across the street from the school.
That's got to be hard to turn down parents, I'm sure.
Well, it was one of I had to bid on that school contract when it came open. We didn't get it. I knew I had outbid anybody else, but I didn't get it. And looking back on it, I'm thankful I didn't get it.
Yeah.
Because what can happen as a school-based therapist is, it doesn't have to happen, but it could happen that I got, or a therapist that I hired would get some sort of reputation in the school. Well, then it reflects back. I mean, it's a small town, word gets around. Mm-hmm. Then it gets back to, well, that's our clinic doing that, and don't go to see them because they did this in the school. So we've avoided that because we didn't get that contract in the same town. Now, that being said, I've got school contracts in different towns that my clinic are not in, and that works out fine. And it's not to say it couldn't work out fine, but then you also have, if you're in the same town getting that school contract and you have a clinic in that town, there potentially could be conflicts of interest or perceived conflicts of interest.
Yeah. In fact, one of my colleagues actually was just sharing a story with me a week or so ago, about how a parent of a student that she saw in school actually, I don't know if she stopped her in the parking lot and asked her if she would see the same kid that she sees in school privately. And she kind of did what you did. She thought about it, but she's like, no, that's a conflict of interest. I can't do that. Where does it turn from school-based to home model-based or whatever you want to call it? And she absolutely just kind of said, sorry, I can't do it. It's too close to too many lines, mm-hmm. and had to turn it away. Mm-hmm. So definitely have to keep that in mind when you're a school-based therapist, potentially trying to get some extra work.
Yeah. And I would say that for any therapists who are listening, who are not doing school-based therapy right now, and you have the keen notion of, well, I know the school down the road, they have the contract coming up. I'm going to bid on that because I can be my own private practice and have a school contract. If you have not done school-based therapy, you laugh because Jayson.
Well, maybe that's why they're listening to this podcast.
You don't want to do that if you haven't done school-based therapy and think I'm going to start my own private practice by getting this contract. It's a good way to get a bad reputation.
All right. Well, obviously part of the reason you're on this podcast, we kind of were touching on it at the beginning, but I want to go back to it, is you have this fantastic resource available online, and I think it's opening up soon here. And so I want to give you the opportunity to kind of share. We've already talked about a lot. You've already given a lot of great value, but what do you go further into detail in this academy you have?
Yes. Thank you for asking. So the Academy of Private Practice, after I had started the podcast and the website, people wanted more. They wanted more of me directly, as far as some hand holding. They also wanted some more resources. And so I created the Academy of Private Practice for that reason. It opens the first quarter of each month. So 4 times a year it opens. So the middle of that first month of the quarter, you can enroll into the Academy of Private Practice. I only open it 4 times a year, and really it's only open, the enrollment period is like 5 days. So that helps me control the flow of new therapists coming in, so I can give everybody personal attention. in the Academy of Private Practice, there's video lessons, there's resources. The relevance here of talking about getting school contract, there's an RFP in there. There's a school contract in there. So as I've contracted with schools, some schools, they don't have a contract that they've created to contract out therapy. That's kind of crazy to me, but I've come across that. I've had a school district say, "You want to see some kids for us? Sure." And I'll say, "Send me the contract." We don't have one. Can you create one and send it to us? So yeah, I've created the school contract over the years, and just some cover paperwork of what to put with that. But then not only that, but also how to find school contracts, how to find what they call RFPs. I didn't know what an RFP was when I started my private practice. Is a request for proposal.
Okay.
And that's common government language. But yeah, if you don't know, you don't know. And if you don't know the terminology to get on Google and search for that, or the different websites of where to find that, or how to approach a school with that notion of, hey, do you have any RFPs, or how to find that? Over the years, I'm like, well, how do I find when these schools are open for an RFP? So that's one aspect of the Academy of Private Practice. That's one lesson in there. And then there's some paperwork that goes to back that up. But not only that, if somebody wanted to open, a brick and mortar clinic, I've got some lessons on that. And then what we do once a month is we have masterminds. So members of the Academy of Private Practice, they're invited once a month, the fourth Thursday of every month, to sit in on a mastermind. And you bring your questions, and we all help each other out with answering those questions. And I've learned a ton from that. I mean, I'd love doing mastermind because I get to help, but then I get to learn from these other practice owners and wannabe practice owners in their ideas of how to start a practice, how to grow a practice. So I get to learn too. I mean, it's a great benefit for me and the other therapist also. Of course, we got a private Facebook group. Everybody, everybody's on Facebook, so we're over there also. And then for Academy members, I offer consultation with me. So actually, before you and I jumped on this call, I got off of a call with an Academy member. Her dilemma was she was in a 300 square foot space. She has some contract therapists working for her. She's moving up in size 1,000 square foot. So her question to me was, she's doing a lot of home health clients, a lot of early intervention. How do I wean myself off early intervention and home health and get more kids in the clinic? Because I got a bigger clinic now. So we had that conversation. I gave her some ideas that have worked for me over the years on how to help her out with that. So that's a benefit of being a member, is you get to schedule time with me and work over some things. So I'm putting, so sometimes we do a book club, like, hey, let's read this book and talk about it. We'll do that sometimes. And it's a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed the Academy of Private Practice and helping out therapists, start their own practice. And if they have more questions on that, I'm sure you can maybe put a link over there on the show notes, maybe.
It'll be everywhere. It'll be on the show notes. It'll be, if you're listening on iTunes, if you just kind of scroll up a little bit, it'll be right there. It'll be everywhere. So be sure to check out startatherapypractice.com and remind them all again once more of the name of the actual academy.
Yep. It's the Academy of Private Practice. And I also want to tell everybody, if over at startatherapypractice.com, if you go to startatherapypractice.com/OT Schoolhouse, I've got a special checklist for you if you're interested in starting a practice. I call this my super duper Start a Therapy Practice checklist, and it's you don't find it on anywhere else on my website. This is not one of my freebies that I give away on the freebie page. So,
oh wow, thank you.
Yeah, I do that just for your listeners there, Jayson.
Thank you so much. So that was startatherapypractice.com/OT Schoolhouse.
That's it.
Great. We will, of course, obviously link to that as well. Make sure everyone can find that. Well, man, you answered, I had a lot more questions and you answered all of them. So I've got nothing left. Is there anything else you want to kind of give a shout out to or say anything else tonight?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be over here. I've listened to you for a while now, Jayson. You do a great job on your podcast, and if people want some more podcasts to listen to, they can search Started Therapy Practice on iTunes, Stitcher, and your other podcast players, and that way you can kind of see what I'm up to. I think at last count, I don't know, I'm up to around 90 different episodes. So if you want to listen to the first episodes of the podcast and start there, just know it gets better from there. I had to start somewhere, right? That's
absolutely. That's the hardest part is getting to starting.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Scott, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking your time out of the day and coming on. I want to definitely recommend to everyone on here, if you are even thinking about starting a private practice, whether you just want to see one client or work your way up to 100, that's the place to start out. That's where I kind of started out a long time ago. I never got around to actually starting my private practice. For everyone out there, go over there, sign up, if nothing else, he has so many freebies and a special one just for you. So be sure to head on over there. And yeah, thank you, Scott. And we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. This is Jayson again. Thank you. Huge shout out to Scott Harmon from startedtherapypractice.com for taking the time to come on here and share with us everything that he does and how he helps our occupational therapy community to get started with our own practice. So the reason that today's podcast was, in April is because summer is coming up. So if anyone is interested in, potentially seeing some clients during the summer, I highly recommend that you check out Scott's website, startedtherapypractice.com, his podcast, Started Therapy Practice Podcast. And yeah, he's just a great mind, great resource. Definitely check it out. With that, be sure to check out the show notes over at otschoolhouse.com/episode 27. We do have links over to his website there. It's pretty easy to remember Started Therapy Practice, but if not, we do have those links over there. So check that out, and we will see you next time on the OT Schoolhouse Podcast. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the OT Schoolhouse Podcast. For more ways to help you and your students succeed right now, head on over to otschoolhouse.com. Until next time, class is dismissed.